Welcome, everyone. The Create, Engage, Succeed show is back on the air and in action. And I am excited to bring my friend and guest, Moes, to my audience here. Amadeus is actually going to probably be doing the bulk of the chatting today because Mo and Amadeus have a lot of common interest from RPGs, role-playing games, game-based learning, gamification, you name it, they've got it, and you might even get a little bit of Star Wars thrown in. So,
oh yes.
And before your introduction or after your introduction, whichever you prefer, I would love to know about that artwork that's behind you.
Okay, so it has a very, very shallow story. I left home, I went for a meeting, I came back, I found it on the wall.
That's
Ta-da.
pretty cool.
That's it. I asked my wife, what is that? She was like, I was bored. Okay.
So your wife drew that?
Yes, my wife is an instructional designer as well,
Wow.
and she does motion graphics and graphic design, and most of the games that we do in our company, she does it. I only come up with the ideas and I work with stock images. She draws, she creates stuff. So yeah.
That is amazing. So, on that note, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because you've got a very interesting background.
Well, I never wanted to work in L&D.
Okay.
I never knew what I was going to do in my life other than I want to be a diplomat. Yes,
Aha.
I wanted to work for the United Nations. And I was one of those geeky, nerdy kids that used to do Model of United Nations, where we actually dress up and we represent different countries as delegates. Yes, laugh as much as you want. This is the true story. I did that. I traveled to more than one country doing conferences, and I was a secretariat in the conference and a co-chair, and we go into caucus and formal debates and informal debates, and we live the life of diplomats. So I really wanted to be like that, like the real deal. Do it. So I did. I worked for UNESCO for a couple of years in the scientific department. I was running a project called the ICDL, the International Computer Driving License. And I stayed there for 2 months, 2 years. And I hated myself and I hated my life working in this. And my aspiration was working for UNDP because this is like the creme de la creme of all UN bodies. And I did my master's on international development for that purpose, which basically I did nothing with, and I never went for the UNDP. And then a friend of mine told me, why not work as a trainer? And I didn't understand what that was. I went for an interview, got accepted, started off as a junior trainer, ended up as a senior training and development supervisor. I loved the fact of research, numbers, working with competencies, and taking people onto like learning journeys. And I thought consultancy is what I want. And I did L&D consultancy for quite a while. But again, it wasn't the thing. I felt that it's better off to work into instructional design until Destiny led me to a company called Practice. They do homegrown board game simulations.
Oh,
So we
fun.
create the stuff. We don't franchise it. We create it. I went in as a product manager and then ended up as an R&D manager. We created a couple of board games there, became a business partner, left the company, took back my money, opened up my own company. And the company that I have, it's called The Catalyst. We do instructional design, but our distinction is in gamification and building gamified learning journeys. So UN games. How? I don't know. But this is
Well,
life.
there are some people that would say the UN is all about games. So,
Yeah. Well, let's be PC about it and let's say, yeah, games. A lot of games.
yes, as I was talking this morning and I said, yes, I've been a game player all my life. I'm like, oh, maybe I need to reword that because it's got such a negative connotation these days when you say somebody's a game player. But really it's not a bad thing. It just depends on how you play the game.
True. True. It's
So
all about the story of the game.
yes, tell the story of the game. Amadeus, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Sure. What about?
Anything you gentlemen want to talk about. So, like, when you're creating a game, because Amadeus has started to get more involved in building the games and moving away from just playing the game. What's your thought process like?
Well, my thought process is pretty much into instructional design to start with, specifically because I'm working in learning games. I'm not working in game. I'm not like
Right.
game development and game design. So it starts off with me with what's the purpose of what we're doing? Is it something that would be tangible? Is it something that the people can do? Is it something that the people would perform in, or is it something that would affect their habitual behavior? So is it a skill to be attained, or is it a behavior to be practiced, or is it merely just bunch of knowledge that we want to get the people into? So why bother to make a game? Because honestly speaking, if I'm going to be making a game, then games are about interaction and about building up something. People need to attain a specific behavior, practice a specific skill. So this is the thought process that I start with. The second thing that I will go for afterwards, I don't know about you, Amadeus, but I'm a comics guy. So are you into comics?
I got into them a few years ago thanks to my roommate.
Cool. So DC team or Marvel team?
Both, but it depends more on the writer for the character.
I see. Okay. Well, I'm a DC guy. I'm pretty much a DC on the DC team because DC, they're men among gods, not gods among men, which is basically Marvel. Marvel, they have ridiculous superpowers.
For sure.
And but DC, well, they're Batman, for example. Oh, here we go. So Batman, for example, Batsy here doesn't have a superpower, but he knows how to do everything with his wits and intelligence. So to me, comics open up a plethora of ideas, possibilities, and that's why most of the games that we come up with come out of mythology, come out of whimsical ideas and myth, because basically once you have a mythical character, you can do anything with it. And if you know what I mean, Mary, about like the epic meaning, the avatar, the possibilities of the avatar, that helps. Yet we do other games that are of realism in its nature, but you tend to get stuck with, you have to be proper with the facts, you have to be proper with the measures of what it is and what it's not. So yeah, the thought process for me would start with the learning, and then I would always go for the story. What am I trying to convey in the form of a story? And if I build that good story, learning mechanics and game mechanics would start to manifest. That's how I see it.
That's great. And so just to chime in on the comics theme, I'm team Gaiman. Is that okay?
Perfect. I have, look, I'm gonna show you something that, I mean, the comics are numerous here. So okay, see, and it's in mint condition. See all of the comics right here and more. So I don't mind.
Okay, well,
don't
because I
mind.
figured Sandman kind of, is sort of the peak of comics. I grew up with, Archie and Jughead and
Sweet.
those kind of comics.
Those are the good classics.
Yes, they are indeed. So one of the things that our company has started branching out into is to work with some of our clients. We're sort of getting out of the instructional design realm and moving into a crossover, which is helping them create game style or gamified lead magnets that are highly interactive mini games. Would you say that same thought process, because we're using a traditional instructional design process to work with the clients, but would you say for something like that you would use the same process, or would you kind of really strip it down?
Um, well, I I would go for the same process for a simple basic reason. Um, when I think about a story, it stories offer its own progression system. It
Mhm.
offers its own means of rapid feedback. It offers its own points where you will be able to introduce challenges, boss battles, quizzes, means of curiosity, means of exploration, how the learner would invest in the events of the story. So even like miniature indie games, like the way I say it, and I'm sorry if I'm not going to be PC about this, toilet games, because you play it when you're in the toilet a lot, or
Uh-huh.
when you're when we're doing anything that is trivial or juvenile. True that it depends on like matched three things. You would make a line, basic Tetris kind of metric. But again, if it's solely this, like it's only like Tetris like, it gets boring after a while. When
Right.
there's a bigger story, like when I'm gonna be done with that, I'm gonna get points, and that points would help me re-innovate the farm, re-innovate the garden. I'm building up on something. I think it was called Farmscape or Castlescape. It was on iOS, I think.
Yeah, and then there was
Oh yeah,
Farmville, and yes.
there you go. There's something. There's a game encapsulated within that story. So even in indie and small games, a story would make sense. And there's another thing that Yukai Chao actually said, that when you have an avatar or you have a specific meaning and calling, it kind of takes the burden off the learner, because after a while you become that avatar. But if the
Hmm.
avatar flunked, oh, that's the avatar. If the avatar won, well, because
Yes,
the
no, that's
mastermind behind it did that, not the avatar. So it's interesting. It's an interesting human condition when
hmm
it comes to avatars. So yeah, I follow the same thought process. Maybe it's easier. I don't know, but this is how I like to approach it.
right. Well,
Some
and
other times when you go into a campaign that is missing a story, you try to stitch something that has a narrative feature at least.
yes. Well, and I think that's where, with both of you being avid gamers, you're used to stories. And, especially when you're playing role-playing games. I mean, some of the best adventures happen when you have a great storyteller leading you on this adventure. Amadeus, you guys, the two of you, talk about the role of storytelling.
I would actually like to bring up a really, and this is a great place to talk about it. One of my favorite game designers, Miyazaki, who's done a lot of the Dark Souls, all of that. He's stated what he likes to do is let the people playing it. He remembers as a kid, he used to not be able to read English that well. So he would go into the library and read a lot of English books, but he could only make out some of the words. So in his mind, he put together the story based around what was given to him, and he would come up with an entirely different story. So his design process in the games was, we'll put the threads of the story there, but leave it to the person experiencing it to really put together as much as they, as deep as they want to dig or as shallow as they want to dig is what they're getting out of a story. And I think that's a really unique philosophy that helps engage the people in that, because now it's not just, well, I'm just reading what's on the screen. It's, I'm putting this together in my own mind, in my own way, and this is making it fit. And that to me is such a unique take on that storytelling aspect. But it's still really important because his games are, people love digging into those, myself included.
True, 100%. And also, if we went back to what Carl Kopp says, there's content gamification and there's structure-based gamification. And many people that work in gamification, they're like, okay, should I build the mechanics first and build the game and then lay a story on it? Or should I put a story first and introduce the mechanics afterwards? Well, I would go with Miyazaki, because the story tells you if you want to go severe in its narrative, you can. If you want to be shallow, you want to go like basic simple story, you can still do so. And
Right.
I'm gonna say something other than comics as well. Since we're talking about comics and games, I'm gonna introduce another thing.
Mhm.
Anime.
Yep.
Anime. I am not kidding. I had a program on human resources in competency-based interviews, and it was supposed to be delivered to like very influential people in the African Union. So what did we do after we understood what we're going to be doing from a learning perspective? We sat right here in the living room, we opened up Netflix, and we started to watch anime. And it started off with an anime called King and Ashura, which is basically a fighting game. And from a fighting game, we ended up to a racing game. Don't ask me how, but this is how it went on. It started off from there, and we took some of the aspects and we planted it. I'm sorry, not planted it. We stitched it together. We stitched it to make something happen. Because when we start to think about it, we're like, HR professionals are going to be fighting each other to death. That's not gonna work.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. I mean, I had, and when we conducted the program, I had someone that actually was from Harvard, and she's a poli sci graduate. And when I went back to my hotel room that day, I'm like, we were gonna do a fighting game. So yeah, but it helps with the thought process. Let's just say.
Right. Yeah, well, and that's something that I like to encourage people to do when they're thinking about even building courses or working with us to help build their courses, is don't get stuck in this rut of it's got to be 5 videos and then there's a PDF and then there's a and yes, a lot of people have gotten successful selling courses like that, and we've all sat through our share of corporate click next to continue training. But there's so many other things out there and so many other images and pictures, like you're saying, watch anime or go watch, I watch stuff about serial killers all the time, but it gives me some great ideas.
Many ideas.
Yeah.
Many
I mean, but
ideas.
because with the serial killers, especially the ones that are from more like the 1800s, like H.H. Holmes and those kind of people, how they manipulated people and how they were able to convince people to take their desired action. Like, hey, I want, and they didn't have the internet, and they didn't have all these other things. It's just fascinating to see how their mind works. And, you could build a whole different training program using some of those mechanics that we see in other types of shows or activities, instead of just going, well, this is the way we've always done it, so this is what we're always going to do. And so I just love the idea that you watched anime and came up with a battling HR.
Well, for a person that watched an anime for over 10 years, and I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, Amadeus, Naruto.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Still
yeah.
going.
Yeah. Every week TV Tokyo just brings that baby up and we watch it. And that brings me to something. I mean, after COVID, people are like, we're so overworked, we're so fatigued by videos. No, you're not. You're bored. If you want to binge on Netflix on Behind Her Eyes, watch the whole thing. You will watch it. And by the way, it was a great series. I didn't expect the ending. I'm like, amazing. I don't. Spoiler alert. I want to say it. I don't want to say it, but the ending.
All right. Well,
see, I can make something out of that. I can make data out of this. So, and what I mean is, you can do branching scenarios. You can do consequences. You can do choices. And I'm gonna be borrowing from Kathy Moore's Haji Kamal, if you know about it. It's basically an e-learning where you take one decision by each and every slide, and if we and which is basically a story, and if we put this into play, people are making decisions, they're taking their time, they're building up their curiosity. And there was a very interesting journal that was talking, we're not empathic, and the talk about empathy is way too much an overrated. We're actually curious. The more curious we are, the more I can bridge that means of curiosity to understand someone else. But empathy gets diluted with sympathy and trying to understand people. No, we're curious. We're curious creatures. So if you build a curiosity to make me watch 6 episodes, which is basically 6 hours, one of two things. Either I wasted my life, or that was a great series. I'm going to recommend it on the next podcast I'm in.
Exactly.
That's what happened.
No, I think that's right. And it's how do you bring in that curiosity, and how do you help shift that mindset Because again, so many of the folks that I work with that we do some projects and things on, they're still in that very traditional format mindset. Video, video, PDF quiz, video, video, PDF quiz. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, and to go back to talking just about the gaming aspect of it, I would say that storytelling works, the Miyazaki style of leaving it blank because we're curious. We're not just giving it to us of here's what you need to know, and you go, okay, I'm done. I read what I need to read. But by leaving parts of it to where it's like I need to find out and understand. I want to understand what happened here. What is this blank? That gets people engaged and involved and wanting to find out, because it's not just handed to them and told here's the story. It's here's a part of the story. You need to go, you need to make out the rest of it.
True. And if I'm going to be building up on something like Diablo, which has something very tedious, that you play the game all the way to the end, you kill Diablo, and then you can play the game again, but on a harder level. So you're curious about what more would the story offer to me? What more would be in the game that I would go through? Although I know, okay, I'm going to go through this and this and this, and then I'm going to kill Diablo at the end. But no, there's something different. So that curiosity builds up the motivation for me to go through and do the act that I need to do.
Right. Agreed.
I like it. Oh, gentlemen, that was a lot to digest in a short period of time.
By the way, I would suggest or advise people to look into something. I found it on Kickstarter, and I got it. I'm just trying to bring it up.
He's reaching.
So this is a game design workshop in a box. It's called the White Box.
Oh.
I feel like I'm selling a cosmetic thing.
Yeah, like here. Would you like to?
Here you go. So what it offers is, and that's why I'm like, okay, I'm gonna buy this. It gives you props, and it gives you like meebles and dice and stuff for you to play around. And then there's this big box on how to go into game design, obviously board games, game design, game development, building your own mechanics. So it's a really good Kickstarter for people that are looking into prototyping a couple of games and like messing around with their with game ideas. It's pretty nice. I can't remember how much it was.
$29.95. I'm on their site right now.
It's basically nothing.
Yeah,
I should note for everyone listening to this podcast, we're not supported by them. We're just.
That's right. This is us having a conversation, sharing the things that we're discovering. We are not sponsored by anyone, but we are always looking for new ideas. I mean, it's just like, Mo, when you were sharing your story about how you got into instructional design, one of the books that I used to always recommend to my team was The Accidental Instructional Designer.
Oh, yes.
Because so many of my team at my last corporate job came up through the ranks as technicians and agents and that type of thing, but they had a passion for learning, but they didn't have the formal credentials. And so it's like, welcome to the team, read this book.
You did the same thing to me too.
Yeah, I did. It's like, hi, I'm Anish. You want to be in business with me? Read this book.
It was awful. And I worked in the telecommunication industry, so I know how awful it is to go into a long durated training. So yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's trying to find fun ways. And one of the things that came up on my presentation today was, how do you bring this into the workplace? How do you start adding those game-like elements without having, let's say, a full-scale gamified program? And I'm not talking gamified programs of every time you log in and watch a training video or a training class, you get a badge or something. But so, I was giving them some ideas of things that I have done in the past. So like we took Cards Against Humanity and turned it into Cards Against Technology, because it was a quick, fun way to help the technicians like learn some of the new stuff. And it's just like, okay, so you're on a call, and you've got this situation. Okay, great. Now go grab some cards. What are some things you shouldn't say to the customer?
I have this saying, it's not mine. I can't remember whom I took it from, but good designers borrow, great designers steal. And I steal a lot, a lot. So I had a game on cognitive biases, and I stole the idea from two people. Number one, the Irrational game, and that was a card game for cognitive biases. I didn't steal that. I didn't steal this. I was like, okay, so cognitive biases can be done through cards. What I stole was the idea of exploding kittens.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. So exploding kittens, I did exploding cars because the theme was cars, and I could show you pictures later on, like grown men snatching cars from one another in exploding cars. It was lovely for me to watch. See that this is the paycheck that I get to see old people, adults getting
Wait a
crazy
minute, I
because
resemble that remark.
no. See, the point is because they get all fussy at first. We're not gonna be playing games. We don't want to do that. They think it's a bit I'm not going to say overwhelming. I'm going to say that they think it's immature to do this. Although when they get into it, they get the learning, they have fun, they enjoy their time, they go back to their homes and they talk about it. So that's why I enjoy it. True, I enjoy something else, which is them fighting over it. This is another hidden joy of mine. But still,
You know, we have to take the joy where we can find it. And while you've been talking, I just purchased the white box.
should be getting a commission. But yeah, it's okay to. I mean, well, I'm looking at the stuff beside me. So I took from Exploding Kittens before. I like the mechanics of it.
Mhm.
So the mechanics of Exploding Kitten, the game where if you got two characters that look like one another, you can like put them down and you
Yeah.
should draw something else. So in that format, what did I do? I've put the definition of the cognitive bias and the cognitive bias. So if you manage to make it, you read it out, you tell it, and then you put it, and then you take another one, and it goes on this way alongside situations of the other types of cognitive biases to put them up together. So I taught them what it is by reading it out and actually playing the game. So that's why I use the Exploding Kitten. And the game that we did in Gemacon, it's a storytelling game, but it had a lot from One Night Werewolf. It had some ideas from it where people do not know what the other person might do or what card they will put. So I only borrowed that mechanic. So the beauty of it is you don't need to play a lot of games, but if you play the game, you can steal the mechanic. Sometimes, and that's where I waste a lot of my money, is that I buy games and I don't actually play them sometimes. What do? What is that? I just look, what is happening here? It's like getting a TV set and like deconstructing a TV. You don't necessarily need to put the TV back together, but at least you know how it was deconstructed. So this is what it is about games. You're trying to understand how things work and you borrow those. No. You steal those mechanics to utilize them in your stuff.
And for those of you that are listening, we are not stealing games. We are stealing the mechanics, the function, because there are actually a list of, and it's a growing list of like 100 game mechanics. Because if you look at games throughout history, here's the teacher in me coming out. But if you look at games throughout history, many games have the same mechanics. So you can't go, well, I made this version of Monopoly and you can't ever do anything like it because I have the rights to this mechanic. No. You might own the rights to what the board looks like or to the play pieces or something like that. But the mechanics are just how things work.
It's not like a storytelling trope. You can't say I own the trope of the hero's journey. That's not something you can own.
Joseph Campbell does.
Yep.
That's only him.
Well, and it's like you were saying, stealing ideas from games. I've gotten hooked lately onto the whole genre of lit RPG, and it's another great way to see the game mechanics without spending a whole lot of money buying games because I'm getting books, and I also do book sirens. Here's another shameless plug for something we don't get paid for. But book sirens and NetGalley are two resources that if you're an avid reader, you can read copies of the book before they go out to the public and provide feedback and reviews to the author. And so
Mhm.
I have discovered a ton of genres that way that I wasn't even aware of, because it's like, oh, sure, I'm happy to help somebody else who's just getting started. What's this lit art? Oh, that was really cool. When's the next book coming out? But
Maybe
there's a lot of storytelling.
I would say that I like RPGs a lot because I like Edgar Allan Poe
Okay.
and Lovecraft. So
Oh,
I do enjoy that genre, if you may.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Kafka, for example.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, the I would love to make a game about the metamorphosis, but I don't know what I'm gonna be teaching or like educating the people about. But the metamorphosis itself, on its own, it's being,
Right.
it's a transformation. So I'm waiting for that proposal from one client where I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna do the metamorphosis for you, but it's not gonna. I mean, it's gonna be more friendly, more colors, and less grim, I suppose.
Yeah, no,
So
that would
yeah.
be pretty awesome. So I know that it is late for you, and we've been chatting for almost 45 minutes already. So the question is, do we want to continue the conversation, or would we like to wrap it up for today, and can perhaps Mo come bring it on as a guest another time? Because this has been a blast.
I mean, I'm okay for. I have I have a course that's gonna
Uh-huh.
start in like 15 minutes. So
So
I'm.
but then we'll wrap this up before I spend more money listening to your recommendations. Fortunately, I already have Exploding Kittens. We have the One Night. We have a lot of those things, but you know,
I'm okay. I'm gonna leave this with one note. There are many types of stories that people can look into because what we were talking about like bestsellers and really, I mean, we're talking about like gold literature when I'm talking about Poe here, but and obviously Joseph Campbell. But there are different narratives that people can look into. Like there's a quest narrative.
Mhm.
There's the zero to hero, from rags to riches. There's the rebirth. I was a bad Mo and then I became a good Mo. I was a bad manager, I became a better manager. And there's also the adventure, and the adventure where you go and go on an expedition and you start to collect data and ideas. So people can take those narratives, and when they're looking at their e-learning, do I want to get people from one point A to a higher A plus? Then I'm gonna go from rags to riches. I want people to learn what is wrong and how it's better to do this. Then let's go from the rebirth that way. If I
Mhm.
want people to go on to something where they're going to be collecting data, they're going to be collecting knowledge, go for a quest or an adventure. So don't look at bestsellers and I'm like, okay, I want to do something like this. It's tough. Start with the basic narratives, and as you go, the story starts to unfold for you, and it offers its own progression system to you to know what to do in it and where to put the means of decisions that would educate the people on what they need to do.
That's a great point. And I think the other part to that, as we're getting ready to wrap up, is don't feel like the first iteration is the final iteration. So just like the great storytellers, you know, it evolves, and that's how you have canon. Like I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and I'm also Supernatural, and there's canon, and then there's what you know, what the fans have created, and then there's crossover, and
Yeah.
it continues to evolve and grow. So it's just like, you know, as the story is starting to come to you, just consider it your first draft. It doesn't have to be perfect the
Your
first
first
time
game
you
would always
launch it.
suck.
Yeah. You know, and the second and the third and the fourth. And then, you know, after you've done it a while, it's just like, oh, now I get it. Um, very, very helpful. Mo, you are always so much fun to talk to. We've done a few
Likewise.
clubhouses. And I know you've
Likewise.
got class, but I look forward to having you on as a guest again in the near future, maybe doing another clubhouse with you. Looking forward to the next way that I can spend money.
Let's go for it. I'm
Awesome.
down.
All
I'm down
right.
with it.
Well, have a wonderful night. For those of you that are in the States, have a wonderful afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Mary and
Amadeus.
signing off
Mo.
with Mo on the Create, Engage, Succeed show. We'll see you next week.